Sorry to oblige you to intervene once again.
Here we go.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that we're here to do another installment of our life and times and multi-faceted interests of Alex.
Thank you.
And this is something that I've been looking forward. This particular topic I've been looking forward to for a while because I noticed the tribal art nature and like a heavy tribal art influence in your artwork before I'd ever seen any of your art. That finding stick that you had.
Yes.
I believe when we met you.
Right.
And I don't know if it registered to me at the time, but I think by the second occasion we met, I noticed, it's a really pronounced feature,
Yes, yeah.
and you seem to include it in a lot of your stuff. So I'm excited to talk about this because I'm sure there's a lot there to talk about.
Okay, and I brought samples, both paintings and some interesting sculpture. So let's see. Why don't I start with the sculpture first?
Maybe could you make a statement, Alex, about the topic broadly of tribal art?
Oh,
and
okay,
what
yes.
you're about to.
Yes.
First about that in general, and then what you'll show us.
That's a very good point. There are four basic things about tribal art for me, and I especially wanted to mention them. So I wrote them down this morning at breakfast, and basically all of the tribal people use color in the right sense. In what appeals to me, it's bold, it's fearless, and it's dynamic. And all the tribes that I've ever encountered, I'm speaking now specifically of Central and Northern Africa, all of the tribes have this within their body art or body clothing, as well as their tribal pieces that they create, have this sense of color. The other thing is there is a strong sense of self. Self-esteem is very high, and they're saying when they're painting their faces or when they're creating a mask, hey, look at me. Look at me. And I think that is really bold. I really like that because that's what I want people to do when they see my work. The third thing is there's also a threat implied in this boldness, and the threat is to their neighboring and enemy tribes, watch out, because I'm here and I'm going to fight and I'm going to protect everything that is mine and my family. So be cautious, and that is my totem that you might see in front of my hut. A fierce-looking mask, perhaps, or a shield, suggesting that not only am I strong, but I will vanquish you, or I will try to. And lastly, the shield that many of them have suggests a personal identity, so that each tribe's shield is different from anyone else's. In much of the same way as the Scotsman has his tartan and his family crest. The McDougalls and the McTavishes, and they're all very proud of a sense of self. We don't really have that in America so much. We might be a hodgepodge of different ancestries, but we don't have that clear identity. This is my family crest. This is who I am. These are my colors. And don't mess. And I think that sums up a lot of my personal interest in the tribal.
I have one other question
Sure.
about what you just said regarding, I think, your second point, the boldness, and the expression of the importance of the self and honoring that and the dignity of it. Do you think of that as like the self, like the individual wearing it, painting his own face, as like I am important, or because he recognizes that he is the current body on Earth that's connected with the ancestors and the divine, and that he's honoring that and them and himself because he knows that he's the same or he's connected to it?
That's well said. You're absolutely right. It's both.
Okay, yeah.
It's identification with his lineage, his birthright, his forefathers, and also he is making an individual statement because he's wearing it, and his brother is maybe taking a different attitude and is honoring some other aspect. So it is personal.
Yeah.
I think you're right in saying it has that personal appeal as well as, hey, my ancestors for 4,000 years this way, have used colors like these, have been fierce warriors.
Okay.
The Maori in Australia, New Zealand, have a sense of this identity and sense of self. The women create what is called a mocha. They paint on their chin a tribal image, and they're respected and known by their tribal marks, and the men as well. And it's rather strange in America when young people decide to get tribal art that belongs to the Maoris and just wear it because it's cool.
Yeah.
It's a desecration of the people who own that, that imagery.
It's used as a fashion statement.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's really cool to have a bunch of Chinese characters, but what are you doing? Why? They're not yours, and they have no. It's not going to increase your self-esteem.
Well, that's. I mean, I don't agree with that. I think I think it does, but for the wrong reasons, maybe, or it's kind of shallow or misunderstood by the person doing it.
Yeah. Well, perhaps that you're right.
I had a similar thought, actually. I'm sorry.
I had a separate question about the term tribal art, but if this is on the tattoo stuff, then maybe you should go first.
It was related to the same point. I think that let's say Westerners, broadly speaking, or let's say Western civilization people, non-tribal peoples, globalized people, I think they latch onto these things because of what you said earlier about how we've lost that sense of outwardly representing who we are, where we've come from, what we what we stand for, and things that differentiate us, and that people are looking for that. They're looking for that sense of cultural identity and a more robustly and more robust and more assertive form of individual identity that's linked to a culture and a tradition, and so they're gravitating towards these other things. And I agree that the application of it might be a little misguided, but I think it is a search for self-esteem and a sense of being rooted in something older and more sturdy than yourself.
But when they're wearing those cool beaded things and the feathers and whatnot, they're not wearing it because it gives them a sense of tradition and a sense of groundedness. They're wearing it because it looks cool. And I agree that they are looking for those things, but they're not finding those things, or those things that they wear are not part of that search. I think those are separate most of the time.
Yeah.
That's my opinion, anyway.
Sure. Yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah. Isn't it cultural
appropriation?
What was that?
Appropriation.
Yeah, appropriation. Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
In other words, taking a little bit from the culture because it impresses us, but well, it seems like it's not really right.
It's a hard question, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If I were a warrior, for example, in a tribe, suddenly I come to America and find that somebody in Florida is wearing my family signs and body tattoos, just an ordinary citizen of America without any tribal roots, without any connection to what this art means, I would find it perhaps a bit offensive. But obviously different points of view.
I can relate to that.
Go.
Sure.
Directly to what he said, because.
Yeah. Well, I think I understand the experience of that in a way, because many years ago I bought this coat that I thought was really awesome at a thrift store, a secondhand store, and it turns out that it was sort of a naval officer's jacket. And I wore it into some establishment where the security guard was he was a former member of the armed forces rather, and he took offense to it because I didn't know this when I bought it, but someone had to have earned the right to wear that particular item, and here I was just buying it because it was really warm and comfortable and looked really cool, and so I sympathized with his with his sort of taking umbrage at that, I thought it was justified.
And I want to jump right in with that one, because the very same thing happened to me, and that's how I became more sensitive. I was in a bar with a Navy peacoat, and I put some military decorations on there, and epaulets and things, and the guy who was in the service and had served a career came up to me and he said, "Hey, when did you serve and what division?" And I said, "Well, didn't." And he said, "Well, you really should think about why you're wearing that jacket." And so that was my baptism, and from that I developed the attitude that I have. leave people with their personal images, what's important to them. Or if you can, then if you can't, then earn. If you like them that much.
That's right.
Well,
like distinguish yourself on your own merits. Right?
I think this speaks to a need in our world for some greater education, opportunity for people.
Yes.
Is like a form of etiquette almost. Like what are the kinds of things that we how do we represent ourselves? And things that we wear. And there are these different things that you might throughout your life encounter and want to put on yourself, like jewelry and whatnot. And here's some broad things to watch for, because this matters. I mean, I don't know what it would be, but people make this mistake, I think, all the time, and they don't want to. And they also want to. They would like to learn about it and wear something that.
I think it's okay with a piece of jewelry, for example, or a piece of clothing. But when you get into body art that is clearly belonging to people, then I think that's where I would draw the line. But certainly we're going to be impressed with Navajo jewelry one day, and perhaps we want some cowboy boots, and maybe Indian necklace. We saw one, so that's fine, and I think that that's certainly tame. It's not going to, shouldn't really offend.
Because we're just doing it as plain dress up. We don't know what we're doing.
Right. Yeah, that's right, exactly. And maybe we're paying a little bit of homage to the people that made the jewelry.
Often, I think.
I mean, they're selling it.
I hope so.
Yeah, they're selling it for people too.
Right. They're also they are selling it after all.
Including the insignia. The army coat and buttons looked cool to you because you admire the men who get to wear those for real.
Well, no, to be quite honest,
maybe not.
I just thought it'd be neat to have a lot of medals. In other words, and I still adorn myself with a lot of jewelry that I like, and I hope other people like it. It's part of my persona. But yeah, I was just thinking, hey, I'm 19 years old in the bar, drinking illegally to begin with, and this guy approaches me, and I've got, medals from Okinawa. Wait a minute, you're too young to have been there. What are you doing, kid?
And the kind of sacrifices that are associated with those in
course,
particular.
Of course, I have a Purple Heart that I acquired. I'm not going to wear it because that really would cause some disturbance. And the other thing that happened was I went to Pearl Harbor with Leslie. She was appearing in Honolulu. It was our wedding anniversary. And she had an opera in Honolulu, and we went to Pearl City to see the Pearl Harbor, one of the ships that they maintained. I mean, they left alone, and you can be on this bridge looking down and see the ship, and it's very emotional. And then they tell you about the story of how these men were just surprised one early Sunday morning by this attack and devastated everything. And so that was another awareness that came to me that, we have to respect this. This is worthy of a lot of respect. We may not agree with the conditions that led to that circumstance, but people have lost their lives, and it's such a tragic thing.
Right. It's fraught with so much emotion.
Yeah.
Exactly. Sure. So to bring it back to the subject of the tribal art, I guess what I'm interested in, and I know that you have your own. I know you prepared. But when were you first exposed to this, and when and how did it become? Because it features so heavily in so many of your pieces I've seen. It seems like did you latch onto it right away, or
it came about through an episode in college where I became interested in the National Geographic magazine. And the joke at the time was, well, you can look at these magazines and there'll be bare-breasted Native women. And, and that's one place you can look at them legitimately, so to speak, not by anything pornographic. So that's how it started. I was probably, again, about 18 years old. And I thought, well, not only is it true that there are bare-breasted women, and most African women do go bare-breasted, and the men are not super involved with the prurient interest in this. It's just a natural thing,
right.
And they take to that that as part of an unfolding of, babyhood, motherhood, all of that.
Right.
So it's not perceived. Let's go look at those women.
Right. It's not licentious. It's just, I mean, well, and we become more licentious because we cover up all this time, and it makes everything underneath that forbidden when it's totally out in the open.
The Puritan ethic and that whole thing. That
repressed sexuality.
Yeah, that destroys our life.
Really, no, I agree.
But anyway, so I started looking at these, and I thought, wait a minute, what are these guys all about? What is this living in huts, and what do they do? So I started reading up on it, and being a hoarder, I established a major collection of the National Geographic magazine going back to the 20s.
Wow.
And at one point, I had from the 20s to about 1995. Now I'm trying to sort of decide to sell some of these. Some of them are quite rare, and they talk about a time that's long gone in so many countries and so many changes in the world.
Yeah.
So the maps are particularly interesting, especially now that countries have been renamed and changed, especially in Africa and Russia. So I looked at these, and then I got interested in, well, what are these tribes in New Guinea? Well, what's the Asmat? Why did the Asmat eat people?
It's a good question. In case you're visiting that area,
that's right.
You'd like to know the criteria for becoming dinner, right?
Exactly. And maybe the neighboring tribe is not cannibalistic. But are these the ones, are the Asmats the ones that ate John Rockefeller? Possibly. He was out there trying to get souvenirs and antiques for his tribes.
I didn't know that.
Well, there's some discussion about whether or not it was. I personally think he was eaten by them. And I'll go on record as saying that.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble, probably, from the Rockefeller family.
Well, that'll get us a lot of
or from the
Asmat.
Anyway,
so that's how it started, and again we're going back to about 1962, pivotal year, because I graduated from high school, and then immediately went to the University of San Francisco, and my plan was to apply, stay in the city, and be at this private school, and it worked out. And I was selected, and I was very happy about that. And then my reading matter along the way was the National Geographic magazine. I would get a fresh one every month, and then I started to go back in the 50s, 60s, 40s, 30s, and 20s, and I still have quite a lot of these. And they're fascinating, and they're so much better than the ones that come out today. As with so many things in printing and books and magazines, the coloration, the photos, the storylines are much more in-depth, much more interesting. So I really like those older editions. And there you have the delineation on different tribes, almost several of them in the course of a year. So that was my fundamental research, and then I started drawing. Saying, hey, this kind of stuff speaks to me. I wish that I could be near these artists and learn from them and show them what I do, not just take from them, but say, hey, look, I like your shield. How about this?
That's really cool. I think so few people actually go that extra step.
Yeah.
They're influenced, but they don't.
It doesn't occur to us. Oh, it didn't occur to me ever. I've never heard somebody say that.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah. It still exists.
Yeah.
And when I was in Australia, I met some Aboriginal artists, and they're on the streets the same way that you might think that they might be beggars. No, they're not. But they're maybe in a loincloth. It's very hot. They're used to the heat, and they're selling some of their paintings. And I said to one of them, I said, his name is Jojo. Jojo, I said, I don't know if I grew up with you and don't remember, but my art looks just like yours. And he said, oh, mine, no. So then I had some sketchbook, and I showed him. Maybe we related.
Did he feel the sense?
Yes. So he was joyful, happy. I was related.
And you saw the resemblance as well.
Yes, he did.
That's cool.
And I can explain that further. There is a technique in art called pointillism, and the French Impressionists used it, especially in artist and a series of very delicately placed dots, but with real thinking as to why those dots are there and what color they're in. And that's something that appealed to me, again, going back to high school. So a lot of my art has that pointillistic approach. Even, for example, this, for example, looks, I'll show that, this bracelet, which I did, it looks to be very much like the Aboriginal would do. And they use the dot sequence in a very intricate fashion, and repeated use of dot in a variety of colors, so that when you stand back, when you're close to it, it's one thing. When you stand back, you really see the universe. It's very exciting. And that's why I want to move to these. But I do want to discuss it further. But I know we have a little bit of time constraint.
Well, I think we're okay for now.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't want to use your battery out because we still have.
It was a really high battery when we started. We should be okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
But also, I wanted to say that bracelet that you have, it's a good example to sort of as a first visual offering, because I find that those dots are really typifying of some of the more of the Southern I've seen. I feel like that's a very typifying aspect of how the tribal art shows up.
And if you get a chance to look at Surratt,
George Surratt. Yeah,
yes,
I love his work.
Okay.
And the pointillism.
Perhaps you could show Jas.
Yeah. You'll recognize it.
Clarify.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah, it's a good inspiration.
Yeah.
And again, if I met him, I'd say, "Hey, George, we were separated at the hip. It must have been a Siamese birth. And but why are you using my dots?" said George.
Maybe you could show that bag I can put it close to the camera as an example of the pointillism that you do sometimes.
Yes. Very good. Yeah, let me do that.
I guess you'll have more in the artwork, but this is a fun example of something you use regularly.
Example, should we talk about that?
Sure. Well, let's just do a close-up.
Oh, sure. My good friend Lindsay gave me this because one of my titles is the mayor of Upper Chestnut Street, my particular block. And so she honored me with presenting me with the king and mayor.
Close.
And I decided to color it. It was just a black and white bag.
Oh.
So this is my treatment with later became Sir Alex. I'm working on an actual crown for myself.
Okay, great, thanks.
I really like this a lot. And what I like is these. It seems like there's a theme of like the dots and the squares and the circles seem to my eye anyway to be sort of variations on a similar way of distributing color and distributing shape, like populating basically this image with color.
Well said.
And that there aren't any lines. I mean, of course there are lines that make the squares, but the squares, they're almost like really big dots.
Yes.
And the circles are also just round dots.
Right.
Bigger, rounder dots.
Right. And again, this is such a small example, but it looks one way close, and then from the distance, wow, what is that? You get a different image, a different impression.
Ruby studied crown.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so maybe we can go on to some of the other.
I do want to start the show, but I do want to indulge any more questions.
Yeah, maybe Jas has some more.
Not right now.
Okay.
And
maybe things will develop as we talk. Yeah, this has become I call it All of Us, and
actually, I'm sorry. I think I want to. So this one video isn't so long. I'll just stop it and then start a new recording looking at this section of work.
Cool.
Oh.
So we won't. The content stays the same, but just I'm gonna pause the video.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Got it.
Yeah.